Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Truergy, also known as Byron of Sidious. This is American Minotaur, written by yours truly, Joshua T. Calkins Truergy. Chapter 16. So, how are you feeling about today? Ashkar asked, seated in the Jacobsons' living room with a cup of coffee in hand. John and Linda already decked out in winter gear to attend Titus's final college football game. Both of them beamed at their boy as he paced the living room, his mind awash with thoughts of the coming holiday and everything that was expected of him to decide on after the new year rolled in. "I'm fine, Ashkar," he said without much thought. "I'm just kind of caught up with the thought that there's going to be the League Scouts out there today in the stands or on the sidelines." "Well, goodness knows. There've been a lot of good reasons for them to keep an eye on you, dear," Linda said proudly, fiddling with her gloves in her lap. "You have been spectacular out on that field this year. Really earned that scholarship." "Yeah, well, my grades from high school weren't exactly the reason I got into the school to begin with, Mom," Titus quipped. He ceased his pacing, checked his watch, and nodded to himself. He still had about 20 minutes before he had to get to the school. A knock on the front door gave him a small measure of relief, and when he opened it, fully covered in their winter best were Henry, Misha, and Katie, looking like they expected to have to march through a blizzard. In Buffalo, New York, in the month of December, this was not necessarily a bad idea. The fellow telling you this story grew up there, so he could tell you. "You gonna invite us in, or have us stay out here until we freeze into porch decorations?" Henry asked. "Shit, sorry, come on guys," Titus said, stepping out of the outlaw mechanic and punk rocker's way. Henry bustled past, taking his shoes off as soon as he was by Titus, followed by Katie, and Misha bringing up the rear. The half-elf illusionist reached out for a quick hug before towing her boots off and shivering. "I hope to hell this wind lets up before kickoff, or it's going to be a bitch of a game to sit through," Misha remarked. Titus quirked his head at her, one eyebrow raised. "What?" "What happened to your good winter coat? The dark green one?" "I think it's still sitting in the back seat of your truck. Didn't end up needing it for the Halloween party, remember?" "Oh, shit. Let me go grab that for you." Titus nipped out to the driveway, retrieving her dark green winter coat from the back seat of his truck and bringing it inside. Misha took off the denim jacket that she had on, revealing the Buff State Bengals jersey she had on underneath. Titus froze for a moment, looking at the jersey. Using colored tape, Misha had put his number, 58, on the front of the jersey. Under the number, there was some sort of thermal press patch of a bull's head on the front as well. He smiled broadly and pointed at her jersey. "I really dig that, Mish." "Thanks. I added the patch a few days ago," she said, pulling the jersey out by the hem a little to highlight the bull's head image. He handed her the winter coat, which she put on and zipped up. "You heading out soon, then?" "In a minute here, yeah," Titus said. He looked around at everyone gathered in the Jacobson living room and took a deep breath. "I'll see you guys at the game," he said, giving his parents each a brief hug before heading out to his truck. When the front door closed, Linda popped up from her seat beside her husband and clapped her hands together. "All right, I've got the hand warmers in my tote," she began. "If you kids want anything light for lunch, I can see what we've got for leftovers to warm up in the fridge." Henry and Katie followed her through to the kitchen, along with John, who paused a moment to give Misha a silent nod before joining them. The half-elf woman was about to join them when Ashkar, using his considerable arm's reach, took her firmly by the wrist, halting her in her tracks. The look he shot her was, to her view, somewhere between vaguely hostile and outright murderous. "Has he talked to you about declaring, girl?" he asked quietly, though his tone carried the same subtle hostility as his grip. "For the draft, I mean." Misha already hadn't taken much of a shine to Ashkar Sutek previously, given what Titus had told her about his birth father. Now, her slender wrist clenched in his calloused hand, that impression was solidified. "No, Mr. Sutek, he hasn't," she said, which was the truth of the matter. He released his grip on her, settling more naturally into John Jacobson's armchair, seeming to have recognized that he had just committed an error of etiquette. And even if he had said something, he doesn't owe it to me to say anything about it. "I don't know, girlie," Ashkar rumbled. "Seems to me from that shirt you've got on that you might actually feel a bit different about that." Misha felt her cheeks flush, her eyes darting down into the side. The native Chaldean Minotaur grunted slightly as he hoisted himself up out of John Jacobson's armchair and zipped up his own coat, preparing to head toward the campus football field a little ahead of the others. "Anyhow, it makes no never mind. He's my son. He'll make the right choice for his best path forward. That goes for career," he said, stepping out into the hallway that stretched back from the front door to the kitchen and the living room he had just stepped out of, giving Misha a knowing, half-lidded, mocking grin. "And potential mates," he added, making his way out of the Jacobson home. By the time Linda came back to the living room to ask Misha again if she wanted anything to nibble on before they all headed out for the game, the half-elf woman had managed to clear away any sign of the lone tear she had allowed to run down her cheek. "You remembered to lock up the house before we left, right, John?" Linda asked when they were a few minutes gone from their home, Misha riding along in the back with Katie. This struck her as a little out of place, given her familiarity with Titus's parents. "Since when do you guys lock the house up when you're gone?" she asked. "There have been a few burglaries up and down the street in this last week," John replied as he slowed down at a red light. "It's really not a surprise. Folks are already heading out of town to visit relatives for Christmas, so there's more empty houses than usual for thieves to hit. Sad that it happens, but it is what it is," he said. As the light turned green, Henry's Jeep flew by on their left in the fast lane, honking as he passed them. "That kid's got to be careful, or he's going to get into an accident." When they finally got to the campus shortly thereafter, making their way to the Bengals field and the risers surrounding it, Misha found herself surprised by the sheer number of people who had braved the nearly 10-degree temperature of the day to come to Buff State's final game of the season. It didn't take a great deal of time or effort to spot the cluster of Minotaurs who had come as a group, all seated together in a pack just a few yards away from her own group. One of them, seated close to the Jacobsons and herself, gave her a nod, and she unzipped her coat with a grin to show the number and the bull's head image. The Minotaur laughed aloud and gave her a thumbs up. "Are these his parents?" the Minotaur asked, pointing to John and Linda. Yeah," Misha said, reaching down and forward to tap Titus's mom and dad on the shoulders and pointing over to him. "Your boy is one hell of a point of pride for us, folks," the fellow said to Titus's parents. "For us as well," John replied, taking the glove off of his right hand, grasping the wrist with his own left hand, and offering it to the unknown Minotaur, in the custom of their people. "John Jacobson, father of Titus Jacobson, husband of Linda," he said. The Minotaur's countenance shifted slightly, subtly, in a way that John had seen thousands of times on his son's own visage since he was just a boy. It was not just friendliness he read there, but honor, respect. The Minotaur took the offered hand in his own, his left hand on his wrist as well. "Chonar Salat, son of Honara Salat, shaman in waiting to my father and our tribe," said the Minotaur. Ashkar stood in the doorway of the convenience store, waiting until he saw both the Jacobsons' vehicle and the Jeep that Titus's friend Henry had driven over to the house that morning pass through the nearby intersection on their way to the campus. He'd left ahead of them so as to avoid being socially compelled to stick nearby, waiting until he could double back to be near the Jacobson home. O'Connell's eyeballs had informed the boss and Ashkar both about the break-ins throughout the week, all houses on the same street as the Jacobsons' home, each one belonging to denizens who had left town for the holidays. "A clever enough cover, fair true," O'Connell had commented to Ashkar at the pub that Thursday following Thanksgiving. "Black Friday travel kicks off, folks start leaving town. It's a common enough sort of thing to expect, even in the suburbs." He cleaned glasses as he spoke, not really looking at what he was doing, much as Ashkar wasn't paying that much attention to his efforts to tighten the bolts on the undersides of the bar's chairs and tables, simply going through the motions. "I'm sensing a but coming along here, boss." "But these break-ins, they're all happening during broad daylight, the times when I've only got one or two eyeballs on your kid's house," O'Connell continued. "I think someone was sent from Boston to take the rod back." Finishing up the last bolt tightening on his current table, Ashkar got up off the floor and walked over to the bar, planting his hands flat on it and leaning toward his employer. "I already know when they'll try to go into the Jacobsons' house," he said quietly. O'Connell paused his wiping, simply moving his eyes to look over at the Minotaur. "Buff State's last home game is in a couple of days. My son's caretakers and probably most of his friends will likely be there for it. The house will be empty." That sounds about right then," his boss replied. "You'll catch 'em red-handed. You take care of them, then call me, and we'll get things worked out from there." Now, Ashkar drove to the Jacobsons' house, pulling up behind the vehicle of one of the two eyeballs that O'Connell had briefed on what was going to go down that Saturday. He lumbered out, approached the vehicle, and tapped on the driver's side window twice. The driver, a scrawny, sickly-looking Hume, just gave him a double nod and leaned his chair back, putting sunglasses on over his eyes to feign having fallen asleep at his post. Ashkar signaled across the street to the other eyeball to do the same, then made his way up to the porch. Snagging the spare key had been simple enough, given that the Jacobsons seemed like most middle-class, mostly trusting Americans. Right above the door frame at the front of the house, his fingers brushed against it, and he brought it down, unlocking the front door and making his way inside. Ashkar shut the door behind himself, locked it, and proceeded immediately up to Titus's bedroom, ensuring that the blasting rod and its box were still under the bed. He then sat in Titus's computer chair, faced the mostly closed door, and pulled the automatic pistol O'Connell had given him out of his waistband, holding it on his thigh as he waited for the inevitable break-in. He found himself hoping it would happen quickly, so he could at least put in an appearance at Titus's game and give himself an alibi. Janga felt a surge of elation as he peered through his binoculars, spotting the eyeballs that O'Connell had staged near the Jacobson house, and realizing that they'd fallen asleep at the wheel, quite literally. "Still, patience in all things," he mused to himself, retracing the steps he had taken when Linda Jacobson had mistaken him for an NFL talent scout. As soon as he had seen the Jacobsons take their seats on the bleachers during the pregame warm-ups, he had bolted for their house, breaking the speed limit the whole way to give himself maximum time to sneak in, get the box, and sneak out and away. There would be no stopping by O'Connell's pub to check in with the Bostonian or with his own former Chaldean employer and compatriot. The moment they realized the rod was gone, they would likely realize who had taken it. The string of break-ins that he had committed up and down the street throughout the week had merely been a measure to confuse the local Leos. Using his lock-picking tool, he made his way once more into the Jacobson mudroom, unslinging the duffel bag that he had brought with him for the job. He fully intended to do what he had done to the other houses, and snatch any tablets, laptops, or other small electronic gadgets that he came across to further the cover for local law enforcement. Even the boy himself, a student of criminal justice coursework at the college, would likely assume it had been a mere curiosity that led to the rod getting taken from the house. The video game system the kid had set up would probably also join the collection of stolen goods, too, just for thematic measure. Swiftly, Jenga made his way into the living room, snatching up Linda Jacobson's laptop computer and shoving it in the bag. In the lone bedroom on the ground floor, he located a Kindle tablet on each bedside table, and these also went into the duffel. The cover work mostly done, he made his way quickly upstairs, stalking directly for Titus's bedroom. When he thrust the door open, the hobgoblin's heart sank into his guts, spotting Ashkar Sutek seated patiently in the kid's computer chair, aiming a gun casually from his leg up at Jenga. "Well," said Ashkar with a serpent's smile, "this is a bit awkward, isn't it, old friend?" "20 minutes later, as O'Connell and his eyeballs, all wearing fake detectives' badges openly slung around their necks on lanyards, shoved the cuffed Jenga Hotep into the back of O'Connell's Escalade, Ashkar shook his head. He took the door in hand and eased it shut himself, almost hitting the hobgoblin in the leg. "What are you going to do with him?" the Minotaur asked. "Don't worry about it, Ash," O'Connell said evenly. "It was good thinking to toss him over that fence in the backyard, though. Put us on the next block over." O'Connell took the box with the blast rod from Ashkar and put it in the duffel bag, which he carried to the back of his vehicle and quickly tossed in, his eyeballs and another enforcer clambering into the Escalade ahead of their employer. When he had arrived, he had given Ashkar a dud replica to put in the rod's place. O'Connell started toward the driver's seat, but was stopped once more by Ashkar, who put a hand lightly on his forearm. "Hey, you think whoever his employer actually is might send someone else? Maybe a team of people?" Ashkar asked. "Not if I can negotiate a sellback for the damned rod, and we'll get his boss's contact out of him, one way or the other." The Hume pulled away from Ashkar and got in his vehicle, rolling down the window for one last word before he departed. "Now get your ass to your kid's game so's you've got an alibi. I'll call you when to come back to the bar." And with that, the Irish thug wheeled away, leaving Ashkar to make his way back to his own vehicle and race to the Buff State campus. He made it to a spot on the far side of the gathered tribesmen from the Jacobsons and Titus's friends, just in time for the second half kickoff. "Gentlemen, that was a spectacular way to top off what has been a fantastic year," Coach Reynolds said as his boys hooted, hollered, and generally busted each other's balls in celebration of a game that had effectively been over since the middle of the third quarter, when Titus had stripped the opposing quarterback of the football and run it back for his first and only collegiate touchdown. As strong as he was, even he hadn't been able to remain on his feet when half of the defensive line gang-tackled him in congratulations, standing in the opposing end zone, holding his arms up to the sky and yelling like some kind of Viking berserker, crying out his victorious survival of yet another battle. "And I am looking forward to coaching many of you for the next couple of years as well. But there are some seniors with us tonight, for whom tonight marked the end of their time playing in the NCAA at any level," Reynolds said, which statement seemed to quiet his players, turn the mood somewhat more somber. "One of those seniors is your defensive squad captain, Titus Jacobson. Titus, come on over here and say a few words, son," said Reynolds, moving to one side of his large wheeled chalkboard. Titus accepted his teammates' applause and calls for "Speech! Speech!" As he took up Reynolds' spot, he motioned for the team to bring their voices down, looking out over them with a bittersweet joy. "You know, back near the beginning of the school year, the start of the season, I wasn't even really thinking all too much about today," he began, planting his hands on his hips. "I was thinking about taking my classes seriously. I was thinking about my biological father, who just kind of popped back into my life, as I've talked to some of you guys about. And I was thinking about how much I love this game." He fell silent for a moment, folding his arms over his chest, closing his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened his eyes, his teammates were holding him steady, every set of eyes on him. To tell you the truth, guys, I still don't know if I'm going to declare for the draft. I am on the doorstep of starting my real adult life. No bullshit. And I've got these 2 directions that I might go. I could lie to you all and say the choice is easy, obvious, but it's not. I'm running out of time to figure out what path I want to walk. Imagine that, he said with a derisive snort. A Minotaur who's lost. This was met with a few chuckles, which he appreciated. You don't have to be like me, waiting until the last minute to figure these things out, guys. Have a game plan for your lives, and stick to it. That's what we've done these last 12 weeks, and it's worked. Make of that what you will. Despite the solemnity of his words, Titus Jacobson received a standing ovation from his teammates.